Welcome to examples of using the properties of isosceles triangles to determine information about a triangle. Here's our first example. Notice this triangle is an isosceles triangle because it has at least two congruent sides. This side here is congruent to this side here. We also need to remember from the isosceles triangle theorem that the angles that are opposite these two congruent sides are congruent as well. So this angle here is congruent to this angle here. So we need to take this information and determine the value of x and determine the value of y. Let's start by determining the value of x. If these two sides are congruent, then they're the same length. So 4x plus 3 must equal 2x plus 29. So now we have an equation that we can solve for x. Let's go ahead and subtract 2x on both sides. This will give us 2x plus 3 equals 29. Now we'll subtract 3 on both sides. And now we have 2x equals 26, so we can divide both sides by 2. So x is equal to 13. So that takes care of x. Now let's see if we can determine the value of y. Since we already determined that these two angles that are opposite the congruent sides must also be congruent, we know that 3y plus 2 degrees must equal 41 degrees. So to set up our equation, we'll have 3y plus 2 equals 41. And now we can solve this equation for y. So we'll subtract 2 on both sides. That'll give us 3y equals 39. And now we divide both sides by 3. And 39 divided by 3 is equal to 13. So using the properties of isosceles triangles, we're able to determine the value of x and the value of y. Let's take a look at one more example. Again, here we have an isosceles triangle because we have two congruent sides. So right away we know that the angles that are opposite these congruent sides are also congruent. So this angle here is congruent to this angle here. So we know these angles are congruent or have the same measure, but we also have to remember that the sum of the interior angles of this triangle would be 180 degrees. So we can take the total sum of the interior angles and subtract out this angle that measures 28 degrees, and that'll give us the sum of the two base angles, which we know are congruent. So this is going to give us 152 degrees for the sum of these two angles. And since they're congruent, we can just divide this by 2, and that'll tell us the measure of each base angle. So each of these base angles has a measure of 76 degrees. So now we can determine the value of x. Our equation is going to be 5x plus 1 is going to equal 76. So we'll subtract 1 on both sides. And now divide by 5. So we have x equals 15. So again, we're able to determine the value of x by using the properties of an isosceles triangle as well as the triangle sum theorem. I hope you found these two examples helpful.